when Donald Trump does it, it is baked into the cake that he says crazy stuff. And so maybe we'll focus on it, for one day and then write it off. And that is the asymmetry that I'm talking about.
Brian Tyler Cohen did a debate on the channel Open to Debate with a guy named Nick Gillespie, who is apparently a libertarian writer. This is from a little while ago, but I had not seen this one before, so I wanted to share it. It's really interesting. They talk about, it's a long discussion, so I will share the link to it. But Brian Tyler Cohen and Nick Gillespie talk about problems with the Democratic Party and also the bias of the media, which is something that is always relevant, I believe. So we're going to take a look at these clips of Brian Tyler Cohen on Open to Debate. I am going to share my thoughts on this as well. Let's check it out together.
I think it's a sign of both. I think it's also largely a function of the fact that when Democrats do have power, we didn't have the media infrastructure to be able to actually give anybody a reason to recognize why we should stay in power. And look what Democrats did, for example. Let's go back to the days of the ACA. I mean, obviously, Obamacare is so popular right now.
The Affordable Care Act.
It would be political suicide to try and overturn it, and yet Republicans still do try to overturn it. But they tried 77 times. Yeah. It's not going to work anymore because it is that important to the American people.
And to your point, Donald Trump and the Republicans ran on, if I win, I will repeal it and replace it. He won. They did not repeal it. They took away the fine that's affiliated with the individual mandate, but they did not replace it.
And in fact, Republicans got shellacked at the ballot box in 2018 on the back of that. And thank goodness there was John McCain there to vote down the last attempt at what I believe was repeal and replace, if not skinny repeal. In any case, there was such a void in Democratic messaging that when Democrats were able to actually pass this monumentally important piece of legislation, it was, first of all, so distorted by the media that while the Democrats were trying to advocate for the virtues of this program and talk about Medicare Part D and just get into the intricacies of this thing, Republicans just basically called it death panels. They likened it to death panels. The thing was wildly unpopular, led to a massive beatdown of Democrats at the ballot box in 2010. I believe they lost over 800 state legislative seats. They lost half of their...
I mean, it was Obamacare, but it was also because of the recession coming out of the financial crisis. People were unhappy ultimately with stimulus spending and whatnot. And, and again, I want to play devil's advocate here. Obama, the biggest problem was he had a Democratic majority. He had to keep giving Democrats more and more what were called sweeteners in order to get them to vote for Obamacare. Is that really the Republicans' fault?
In large part, it was also a function of the fact that we had a much more conservative Democratic majority than we do today, for sure. But I think it is also a function of the fact that we had very little Democratic messaging actually going out, both organization and the infrastructure to actually get that message out. And so what was left in the aftermath of that was people actually thinking that the ACA would lead to some type of death panels. And the irony, of course, in that is that we have judges right now who take someone like Kate Cox, for example, the woman in Texas, whose fetus had a fatal genetic condition, and she had to go to a judge to decide whether or not she could stay in the state and get that exemption for the abortion ban, or whether she would have to flee the state. So now we actually do have death panels 15 years after Republicans fear-mongered about it. But
do you think PolitiFact is a wing of the Republican Party or of the conservative movement?
No.
Yeah, because in 2013, and I mean, this is important, right? Their lie of the year, they would give a lie of the year, and they gave it to Barack Obama for saying that if you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep it. And they said that was an absolute lie. It always was a lie. Is that, is that Republican subterfuge, or is it, and what I'm getting at here is like, if you're not a partisan already, like I feel like you're tipping the scale so much that it is, it's a little hard to take. That you're saying that the media infrastructure is built up against the Democratic Party?
Yes.
Okay.
And I do believe that. I do believe that the media infrastructure and the reason that it's different now, for example, is that for the first time, Democrats are able to have some semblance of a progressive media ecosystem that is able to promote the accomplishments that they've been able to pass in just the last 2 years when Democrats had full control of government, as opposed to the most recent 2 years, where when Republicans had virtually the same majority in the House, what they did with their political capital was basically start investigations into Hunter Biden.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating to me from the perspective of, what happens. This happened with Bill Clinton starting in 1992. He won, barely squeaked into office. It was one of the tightest races. And we've been in an era of tight races, I think, because nobody's quite sure what they want. But, by 94, he had elected for the first time in decades of full Republican Congress and Senate. And then the Republicans screw it up. And then, George Bush comes in and he ends up screwing it up. Like, Obama got what he wanted in his first 2 years and then elects a Republican Congress. And then, so it's kind of this back and forth. And I guess my question with that is, when you say now Democrats have a messaging machine, is it the message or is it the content of the message that keeps things going back and forth?
I firmly believe that it is having that messaging apparatus. And you look, for example, at the Ailes memo, and this was the precursor to what would become Fox News.
Right.
And they looked at what happened with Richard Nixon and Watergate, and there was no messaging apparatus to defend Republicans, and Roger Ailes didn't want that anymore. He didn't want a Republican to have to face that type of accountability that Richard Nixon faced, and so
and
Fox
the
News,
Republican Party, they got blown out throughout the 70s because of that.
and you fast forward to today, where we do have Fox News in addition to the other right-wing outlets.
I mean, you've got Fox News, maybe the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post is smaller, but like the New York Times, MSNBC, these don't rate or they are actually Republican.
What I'm saying is Fox News. Do you want me to name other right-wing outlets, for example?
No, I'm just curious because, the Republican or the conservative rejoinder is like, what are you talking about? ABC News, NBC News, CBS News are all left-leaning or they're friendly to the Democrats.
I think my contention would be, while there may be left-leaning journalists and reporters at those networks themselves bend over backwards to try and prove that they are neutral, and so they show an asymmetry there. But back to my initial point with Fox News, if you fast forward to today and you look at what Donald Trump did with January 6th, for example, not only is he not being excommunicated from the party as Richard Nixon was in 74, but Republicans have rallied around him because he has that media apparatus that, as I mentioned before, Fox itself had to pay nearly $1 billion while defending him.
I want to stop here for just one moment. I agree with much of what Brian Tyler Cohen is saying, and this is maybe splitting hairs a little bit, but my argument would be the mainstream media like CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and the rest are openly hostile towards progressives and progressivism. I don't think they have a problem with the Democratic Party establishment, which is very centrist. The pro-corporate and now even pro-war Democratic Party establishment. But they are openly hostile towards progressives like Bernie Sanders and AOC. And I'll give you an example of this. Back during 2019, I was working in an office. Up until that time, I hadn't watched for quite a while most of the 24-hour news networks because I thought they were all propaganda in one way or another. And I was working in an office that CNN was on every single day. So I was hearing CNN sitting, at my desk 8 hours a day. And nearly every single day for a year, they would have Bernie Sanders or AOC or someone else like that on, and they would always talk about Medicare for all. And every single time, without question, no matter which host it was, the very first thing out of their mouth would be Bernie or whoever else they were speaking with. How do you pay for it? How do you pay for Medicare for all? And often it was, well, people don't want this. Democrats don't want Medicare for all. There was never any discussion from the CNN people of, hey, this is what they do in country X that would be similar to Medicare for all or country Y, and these are the benefits or these are the pros and cons. It was just, how do you pay for it? People don't want it. So it was absolutely clear from the top on down that the party line with CNN was going to be Medicare for all is bad and we are against it. So that showed me, that was just one example, but I'm not kidding when I say it was just about every single day for an entire year that I almost started to just keep a chart to count, but it was constant. So that's where I would I think Brian Tyler Cohen is mostly right, but that's where I would quibble a little bit, where I don't think they're really against the Democratic Party, but they are against progressives.
And so this is the culmination of those efforts to make sure that people are manipulated in such a way to believe that based on what they hear from partisan media, which was set up expressly to protect Republicans, that in the case of Donald Trump, he's done nothing wrong.
Why is Fox News so popular? Is it because it's tricking people or because it's actually speaking to what they care about?
I think that Fox has gotten very, very good at learning how to manipulate people who watch them, preying on fears. And also in terms of popularity, the other networks have basically been able to slice up the half of the electorate that probably identifies as more liberal. And so it looks, just from first glance, that Fox is just this behemoth and that conservatives must rule everything. But in fact, if you just add up the share of ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and all those other outlets, it would, our country would look 50-50. But I do think that Fox has been extraordinarily effective in terms of manipulating people. We know, for example, thanks to the investigations that have happened recently, that behind the scenes, with regard to the events of January 6th, these Fox hosts knew exactly what they were doing. They were laughing at it, and yet they would go on air and tell their audience something completely different to what they were texting each other unto themselves. So they know the truth, but the point is to manipulate people who watch that network on behalf of the political party that they want to support.
And
I don't think that there's any equivalency between that and anything that happens on ABC, CBS, NBC, or any of the other perceived left-wing outlets.
And I also think that Brian Tyler Cohen is correct here in his assessment of Fox News. They have really tapped into going after people's fears, as he said, their biases, and, they play this game where they pretend to be news, and I think most of the people who watch their network really believe it's news rather than it just being entertainment, and they laugh at it. But anytime they get sued, then they just say, well, no reasonable person would ever take this as reality or facts or anything like that, which is just kind of incredible to me that Fox News is able to stay on the air doing that they're called Fox News. It's right in the name, but they say, oh, this is just entertainment. People aren't supposed to take this literally. And, they have a lot of power in swaying opinion in this country. And they're a big part of the reason that we have Donald Trump in office right now. But let me know what you think about all of this. Do you agree with Brian Tyler Cohen here in his assessment? And as I said, this is from a few months ago, but I had not seen this. So I thought maybe people who watch my channel might be interested in this as well. It's kind of an evergreen topic. But if you want to watch the whole thing, I will share the link to Open to Debate. But let me know in the comments what you think about what Brian Tyler Cohen had to say here. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.